Alright, this video is going to go over some normal stuff that you might see in Excel, kind of familiarize yourself with the layout of the spreadsheets and what belongs in different tabs, different types of cursors, etc., etc. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do for this one is open your Activity 1 data spreadsheet. That's this guy here. Okay. And then this video is going to be linked where it says Excel Familiarization, so easy access that way. First, let's look at the spreadsheet layout. So this is pretty much it, right? We have rows indicated by numbers, and we have columns indicated by letters. So we could easily, like you can see the cell that is selected currently is B9. Okay, that shows up in this area. Some other helpful things that you might want to know about is if I select an area, you'll notice if you watch this box up at the top, it will tell you how many rows and columns you have selected. Okay, so sometimes that could be helpful. In general, the Home tab is primarily where you're going to do most of your formatting stuff. So we have some quick tools for copying, pasting, cutting. You can change font, what the font looks like. If you wanted to add any types of borders, specifically I would use this if you're making tables and you want to make them look pretty, but we won't necessarily be using borders a whole lot, but you're definitely free to play around. We will be using colors sometimes. So if you wanted to highlight a range of cells or you only want to color in one cell, if you click on the drop-down menu, you can choose the color that you fill in with. So let's say I wanted to make this green, right? We can also change text color. This is very similar to Word, right? And then you can go up or down in terms of the font size that you're using. We can also say where we want our text to show up, right? So left align, center, right, if you want it at the top, the middle, or the bottom of the cell. We also have merge and center. This will be useful. For example, like I wanted this practice box to go across all of my cells. So I can use the merge and center. Right now you can see each of these as individual. If I wanted to have text go across a certain range of cells, I can just merge and center them. You can change the alignment if you want it not centered. The wrap text is also helpful, especially if you have a lot of text that you're entering into your data sheet. So we might occasionally use that here and there. The number formatting area is good if you want to make quick changes to dollar values, percents. If you want to increase or decrease your decimal, so if you hover over, you can see which one you're doing. You can also change the format of the text that you have inserted. Okay, so sometimes we might have to mess with this. Usually the way that I set up the spreadsheets for you guys should be set up with the correct format, but sometimes things get clicked on and then they all get messed up. But that's where you would change that type of thing. Conditional formatting is a fun tool that we'll use here and there, but you can highlight cells based on if they meet a certain criteria, which is kind of cool. And then that's pretty much as far as we go in the Home tab for Excel. If you click on the Insert tab, this is probably the next most used tab, I guess. We've got table setups, which I don't typically use with you guys. Usually we just make tables on our own, okay? But there are table options over here. The probably most used area that we're going to explore in this, well, maybe not most used, but we're going to get some practice making some graphs and different types of charts. So this is where you would find all of your chart types. If you hover over any of these, they tell you what type of graph you are creating. So this would be like a column or bar graph. This would be, technically it's a histogram, it says statistical. Line graph, scatter plot. Okay. If you wanted to get fancy with some symbols or text, these functions are pretty similar to what you would find in Word, right? So if you click on symbols, you can insert mathematical symbols or equations. If you're working on a MacBook, I like to put emoji and symbol keyboard shortcuts up in my toolbar. So that way I have easy access since the symbols that are provided in Microsoft programs aren't always super extensive. But you should have everything you need in the program. Page layout. This could be helpful for a variety of reasons. Maybe not so much for this class, but if you ever needed to change margins or the orientation, particularly if we go to the View tab and you use a page layout where you wanted to print out a spreadsheet that you've made, we typically will stay in the normal view. So if you were ever using Excel in the future and you were trying to make, like an attendance list, or if you're doing a data collection and you want, tables that you can fill in, like if you're taking someone's age, height, and weight, right? You can easily write those in, but you can make a spreadsheet format that fits a page layout, which is kind of nice. Okay. Just so we keep going down the line, if we click on formulas, this is where you can find any functions. So there's an insert function symbol here or icon. This does technically the same thing as what you see in this toolbar at the top. So if we click on that, it'll bring up the formula builder toolbar on the side, right? If I exit out of that and click on this one, you can see it does the exact same thing. So this function icon you can use to search for any common functions that you might want to insert. You can see recently used ones for me have been like standard deviation, a count, a max, average, sum. Okay, so if you are thinking of like this is a mathematical function, I want to see if Excel has a formula for it, you can search in the formula builder. Okay. Otherwise, you can just press equals and start typing. That also is another way to search for functions. We'll kind of cover that in a little bit. If you want to carry out an auto sum, so let's say you have values in each of these cells, you can click auto sum and it will give you the sum of whatever the values are in those cells, which is also pretty handy. Okay. Typically we won't be in this area, but just to give you some options on how to search for functions. In the Data tab, we primarily will be working with sorts and filter functions. So we'll practice this in another set, but you can sort and filter your data based on certain characteristics or criteria. Review, you can insert comments into cells. So I actually keep track of my monthly expenses in an Excel spreadsheet, and oftentimes I will add comments into certain cells, and then you can see any notes that you've kept track of in your spreadsheet. So I know students in the past have used this if they wanted to make notes in their activities. You can either insert it as a comment or you can insert it as a note. And so when you have notes, whenever you hover over, you can see the note pop up on the side. Okay. So I'm going to delete that note. But that could be useful for some of you if you know, you're doing your activity and you have a side note pop up in your head and you want to take a note on your spreadsheet. That's a way to do it. View is another kind of cool area. I've already showed you can change how your spreadsheet shows up. I don't have any custom views, but I usually keep it on normal. That's the default. If you want to show any specific components, so formula bar is this up here, I would always keep this visible. Grid lines, and then headings we don't really have to worry about because that would be probably more applicable if we were using a page layout. One thing that I do like to point out on here though is the window function. Okay, you can see a drop down. We've kind of got some different options here. But you might find this handy if you ever want to freeze certain cells or columns or rows. You can go to this view window and then you can freeze a selected set of panes. So you can see that a darker line has been added here. So anytime I scroll, these panes will be frozen, so they won't go away if I'm moving around. And then I can simply unfreeze the panes if I want to be able to navigate sideways. So sometimes we'll use that, sometimes we won't. You might find it helpful, you might find it not. But generally, those are the tools that you will find in Excel, okay, in terms of your tabs and general layout. For cursors, I just went ahead and put a nice little table for reference. You'll notice the white plus sign is the default cursor, so when we click around, right, you can see the white plus sign. Whenever we have a cell that is highlighted or a range of cells that is highlighted, you'll notice there's a little green little green box in the bottom. Okay, if I hover over that green box, you will see that the white plus sign turns into a black plus sign. So that's here, right? And we can use that for copying or autofilling cells. So we'll be able to practice with this as we go through some of the practice activities. If you want to select an entire column or an entire row, you're looking for these directional arrows. So if I hover over any of these column headers here, right, you can see a black arrow. If I click, I have selected the entire column. Same thing for a row. Sizing pointer kind of looks like this. It's like a black line with two sideways arrows. If you hover over either, you know, between columns or between rows, you will notice that you can resize any of the cells to your liking. Okay, so height or width. So this can go arrows going sideways and arrows going up and down. The direction of the arrows just indicates what direction you're changing the size. The resizing pointer, I don't have a spreadsheet yet that has an example of this, but we will explore that in our activity. But basically, when you have a set of data that has been selected or is a part of a formula that you've already inserted into a cell, if you hover over the bottom corner, or actually any of the corners that have a colored square, sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're red, green, purple, it kind of depends on how many cell ranges you have in a given formula. But this icon where you've got two arrows and two corner brackets, that icon will help you resize the selected area that is in a formula. Okay. We also have a move hand that will kind of review the function of when we look at the resizing pointer. This would be if you have a set range in a formula and you want to move that range around but not necessarily resize it, this little hand icon will pop up. And then your editing cursor is pretty much what is showing up right now, right, as I click next in Word. But if you double click in a cell, right, technically if you click on a cell, you've selected it, you can type, and you're good to go, okay? Let's say that I wanted to change the contents in that. I can either click up here so you can see my editing cursor has shown up. I can also double click in the cell, right, and you can see my editing cursor has also shown up there. So there's a couple of ways that we can edit contents, but if you're inputting text or you're manually entering an equation or a formula, that is the cursor that should be shown in Excel. I've also included some keyboard shortcuts that may or may not be useful. Some of you may be familiar with them already. I made it a list for both Mac and Windows because the keys are a little bit different here and there. So Mac, generally, it's Command. Windows, the equivalent is Control. And then the other two varying keys are Option on Mac, which is equivalent to Alt on Windows keyboard. Okay, but I've given you some shortcuts on copy, cut, paste, undo, redo. If you want to select separated cells, I'll show an example of that. So let's say I have this range of cells and I want to copy another range of cells or select another range of cells at the same time. I can press and hold Command, and then select more cells, right? I can select single cells, right? And anything that you have selected will turn gray after it has been selected. If I have a super, super long list, I'm going to say my super, super long list ends at row 34. But if you want to click, let's say my list starts here and it ends down here. If you press and hold Shift and click on the bottom end of the range that you're interested in highlighting, that's a kind of a quick way to highlight a lot of values. Alternatively, you can just click and drag. Okay, and that works in both the row and column directions. So if you just hold Shift and then click on your range, you can kind of select quite a bit of stuff. Another cool shortcut if you're selecting a lot of cells is to press Shift and Command or Shift Control and then click an arrow. So I just clicked the down arrow and you can see it took me to the very bottom of the spreadsheet. If I click Shift Command up, it'll take me back up to the top. When we actually have data, let's say that is filled in these cells, usually if you use this shortcut, it will automatically select any cells that are filled. So instead of going all the way to the bottom of the spreadsheet, it'll just go to the end range of where you have data inserted. So that's kind of this a description of this last part here. Lastly, mathematical operations. This is actually something that I discovered recently, and I was so mind blown by it. But let's say I want to do less than, greater than, equal. All of those keys are available to you on your regular keyboard. But there are some times where we want to write. Maybe it's in Word. In Excel, I don't think these functions work, or the operations work. But if you click on Option or Alt, and then you click less than, right now you have it a less than or equal to. Similarly, if you click on Alt or Option and the greater than symbol, you get a greater than or equal to. And if you click on Option or Alt and the equal sign, you end up getting a not equal to. Okay, so when you're typing out your in your answer sheet, sometimes those shortcuts might be useful. And I think that pretty much covers kind of the introductory stuff for Excel. Now we're going to get into some practice, actually working with some values instead of just clicking around. But feel free to just kind of take the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes to review any of the things that we just covered, go over the layout, make sure you understand where to find certain contents. Again, the home, insert, and I would say data tabs, maybe the view tabs, those are going to be the ones that we use the most in this class. But if you're curious as to what is in these other areas, feel free. If you're using Excel on an iPad, I do know there's a draw function. I haven't used this on my iPad yet, but I have used the draw function in other Microsoft programs, and it is nice if you want to make notes or draw on stuff as you're going through your activities. So feel free to explore, and then we'll come back and review our practice number 1 section.